دبي موئل الثقافات وحاضنة الإبداع، تحتضن بين أركانها مزيجا فريدا من الثقافات والتقاليد، حيث يلتقي التراث العريق مع الفكر الحديث. على مر العصور كانت دبي مركزا للحوار الحضاري وبيئة مثالية لتلاقي العقول والأفكار من مختلف أرجاء العالم، ساعية دوما لتعزيز ثقافة المعرفة والانفتاح. وهنا اليوم في قلب دبي حيث يبنى المستقبل، في هذا الصرح الثقافي مكتبة محمد بن راشد، تلتقي نخبة من العقول من جميع أنحاء العالم في حدث يجمع بين أمجاد الماضي وتحديات الحاضر ورؤى المستقبل. أهلا بكم في أول نسخة من مؤتمر دبي الدولي للمكتبات، حيث تبدأ رحلة جديدة لإعادة تعريف دور المكتبات في العالم. أكثر من 60 خبيرا من 25 دولة يجتمعون ليطرحوا رؤى جديدة ستعيد تشكيل مفهوم المكتبات. استعدوا لاستكشاف التحول الرقمي في المكتبات عبر الذكاء الاصطناعي واكتشاف الكنوز الأيقونية والمجموعات النادرة. من خلال أكثر من 60 جلسة نلقي الضوء على مستقبل المكتبات وأهمية التراث والمعرفة للأجيال القادمة. إنه الحدث الذي سيخلد في تاريخ المكتبات، مؤتمر دبي الدولي للمكتبات 2024، حيث يجتمع الماضي والحاضر والمستقبل. دبي موئل الثقافات وحاضنة الإبداع، تحتضن بين أركانها مزيجا فريدا من الثقافات والتقاليد، حيث يلتقي التراث العريق مع الفكر الحديث. على مر العصور كانت دبي مركزا للحوار الحضاري وبيئة مثالية لتلاقي العقول والأفكار من مختلف أرجاء العالم، ساعية دوما لتعزيز ثقافة المعرفة والانفتاح. وهنا اليوم في قلب دبي حيث يبنى المستقبل، في هذا الصرح الثقافي مكتبة محمد بن راشد، تلتقي نخبة من العقول من جميع أنحاء العالم في حدث يجمع بين أمجاد الماضي وتحديات الحاضر ورؤى المستقبل. أهلا بكم في أول نسخة من مؤتمر دبي الدولي للمكتبات، حيث تبدأ رحلة جديدة لإعادة تعريف دور المكتبات في العالم. أكثر من 60 خبيرا من 25 دولة يجتمعون ليطرحوا رؤى جديدة ستعيد تشكيل مفهوم المكتبات. استعدوا لاستكشاف التحول الرقمي في المكتبات عبر الذكاء الاصطناعي واكتشاف الكنوز الأيقونية والمجموعات النادرة. من خلال أكثر من 60 جلسة نلقي الضوء على مستقبل المكتبات وأهمية التراث والمعرفة للأجيال القادمة. إنه الحدث الذي سيخلد في تاريخ المكتبات، مؤتمر دبي الدولي للمكتبات 2024، حيث يجتمع الماضي والحاضر والمستقبل. دبي موئل الثقافات وحاضنة الإبداع، تحتضن بين أركانها مزيجا فريدا من الثقافات والتقاليد، حيث يلتقي التراث العريق مع الفكر الحديث. على مر العصور كانت دبي مركزا للحوار الحضاري وبيئة مثالية لتلاقي العقول والأفكار من مختلف أرجاء العالم، ساعية دوما لتعزيز ثقافة المعرفة والانفتاح. وهنا اليوم في قلب دبي حيث يبنى المستقبل، في هذا الصرح الثقافي مكتبة محمد بن راشد تلتقي نخبة من العقول من جميع أنحاء العالم في حدث يجمع بين أمجاد الماضي وتحديات الحاضر ورؤى المستقبل. أهلا بكم في أول نسخة من مؤتمر دبي الدولي للمكتبات، حيث تبدأ رحلة جديدة لإعادة تعريف دور المكتبات في العالم. أكثر من 60 خبيرا من 25 دولة يجتمعون ليطرحوا رؤى جديدة ستعيد تشكيل مفهوم المكتبات. استعدوا لاستكشاف التحول الرقمي في المكتبات عبر الذكاء الاصطناعي واكتشاف الكنوز الأيقونية والمجموعات النادرة. من خلال أكثر من 60 جلسة نلقي الضوء على مستقبل المكتبات وأهمية التراث والمعرفة للأجيال القادمة. إنه الحدث الذي سيخلد في تاريخ المكتبات، مؤتمر دبي الدولي للمكتبات 2024، حيث يجتمع الماضي والحاضر والمستقبل. دبي موئل الثقافات وحاضنة الإبداع، تحتضن بين أركانها مزيجا فريدا من الثقافات والتقاليد، حيث يلتقي التراث العريق مع الفكر الحديث. على مر العصور كانت دبي مركزا للحوار الحضاري وبيئة مثالية لتلاقي العقول والأفكار من مختلف أرجاء العالم، ساعية دوما لتعزيز ثقافة المعرفة والانفتاح. وهنا اليوم في قلب دبي حيث يبنى المستقبل. في هذا الصرح الثقافي مكتبة محمد بن راشد تلتقي نخبة من العقول من جميع أنحاء العالم في حدث يجمع بين أمجاد الماضي وتحديات الحاضر ورؤى المستقبل. أهلا بكم في أول نسخة من مؤتمر دبي الدولي للمكتبات، حيث تبدأ رحلة جديدة لإعادة تعريف دور المكتبات في العالم. أكثر من 60 خبيرا من 25 دولة يجتمعون ليطرحوا رؤى جديدة ستعيد تشكيل مفهوم المكتبات. استعدوا لاستكشاف التحول الرقمي في المكتبات عبر الذكاء الاصطناعي واكتشاف الكنوز الأيقونية والمجموعات النادرة. من خلال أكثر من 60 جلسة نلقي الضوء على مستقبل المكتبات وأهمية التراث والمعرفة للأجيال القادمة. إنه الحدث الذي سيخلد في تاريخ المكتبات، مؤتمر دبي الدولي للمكتبات 2024، حيث يجتمع الماضي والحاضر والمستقبل. دبي موئل الثقافات وحاضنة الإبداع، تحتضن بين أركانها مزيجا فريدا من الثقافات والتقاليد، حيث يلتقي التراث العريق مع الفكر الحديث. على مر العصور كانت دبي مركزا للحوار الحضاري وبيئة مثالية لتلاقي العقول والأفكار من مختلف أرجاء العالم، ساعية دوما لتعزيز ثقافة المعرفة والانفتاح. وهنا اليوم في قلب دبي حيث يبنى المستقبل. في هذا الصرح الثقافي مكتبة محمد بن راشد تلتقي نخبة من العقول من جميع أنحاء العالم في حدث يجمع بين أمجاد الماضي وتحديات الحاضر ورؤى المستقبل. أهلا بكم في أول نسخة من مؤتمر دبي الدولي للمكتبات حيث تبدأ رحلة جديدة لإعادة تعريف دور المكتبات في العالم. أكثر من 60 خبيراً من 25 دولة يجتمعون ليطرحوا رؤى جديدة ستعيد تشكيل مفهوم المكتبات. استعدوا لاستكشاف التحول الرقمي في المكتبات عبر الذكاء الاصطناعي واكتشاف الكنوز الأيقونية والمجموعات النادرة. من خلال أكثر من 60 جلسة نلقي الضوء على مستقبل المكتبات وأهمية التراث والمعرفة للأجيال القادمة. إنه الحدث الذي سيخلد في تاريخ المكتبات، مؤتمر دبي الدولي للمكتبات 2024، حيث يجتمع الماضي والحاضر والمستقبل.
Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you to our next panel discussion this afternoon, and thank you for coming. We're very pleased to have a discussion entitled The Journey of Words. And I'm very pleased to introduce our two speakers. I will be moderating the event this afternoon. First, His Excellency Zaki Anwar Nusseibeh is the Cultural Advisor to the President of the United Arab Emirates and the Chancellor of the United Arab Emirates University. He is no stranger to the United Arab Emirates community, and we've met before, and he's become a dear friend. He's been active in government, as many of you know, government service in the UAE since its formation in 1971, and with the government of the Emirate of Abu Dhabi since 1968. He has an enormous background and legacy, and also a very intimate relationship working with Sheikh Zayed. And so we are very pleased today to have him with us to share some of those stories about words, having worked with Sheikh Zayed. And our other distinguished guest is Sultan Suad Al-Qasimi, and Qasimi is an Emirati educator, art collector, scholar, and columnist. He is an influential commentator on Arab affairs, and in 2010 he founded the Bargiel Art Foundation, which is an organization based in Sharjah dedicated to the arts of North Africa and West Asia. His mission is to promote the art by artists from the Arab world, and he is an authority and expert on modern and contemporary art in the region. So we welcome both of you here today. And I'll start just with a brief story, and because both of you, as we know, are wordsmiths, craftsmen of words. And this morning, as I made my way here, I drove past the Founders Memorial in Abu Dhabi. I live at the end of the Corniche. And I pass by that Founders Memorial daily, usually in the morning and evening, every day. And depending on the way the sunlight, whether the sun is rising or setting on the day, the way it hits the angles, the way it hits the memorial, I see often the face of Sheikh Zayed shining down on me. And depending on the day, whether I'm waking up and looking with aspiration for what's to come, I have a sense of hope every time I pass that memorial. And then sometimes if I'm driving home and it's been a rough day and there's a little despair because there's a lot of work, I have a sense that everything's going to be okay. So I'll begin with you, Zaki. I'd like to see if you can talk to us a bit about the legacy that Sheikh Zayed has had. First on the Emirati people, but also I think on everyone who lives here today, the hundreds of thousands of people that have passed through the United Arab Emirates. And we often memorialize his words, but I think you know best what those words are. And perhaps you can say a bit about the legacy of those words to get us going into this conversation.
Thank you very much for your introduction. You know, you just said now that every time you pass by this memorial, you have a sense of hope, not only in what is happening today, but what you hope will happen in the future as well. And I think this typically describes Sheikh Zayed's impact on not only the community, not only on the society in the UAE, but I would say regionally and also internationally. Sheikh Zayed came as a source of hope at a critical historical moment when, as you remember, the British, who had 150 years of special treaty relationships with the trucial states, having not really left behind much in the or any development in the Emirates, and took a decision, a sudden decision, that they will withdraw whatever security umbrella that existed within 3 or 4 years, without giving the chance to the rulers in the Emirates at the time to create alternative security state structures that could ensure the safety, the sovereignty of the Emirates. And Sheikh Zayed was a leader who came through at that moment. He has been, of course, a leader for a number of decades, initially in Al Ain as governor, but subsequently in the Emirates as ruler of Abu Dhabi. He came with this hope that we can create a modern state. This modern state will be able to withstand the threats surrounding us in the region. We will be able to unite. And that was hope that he brought to his people. And I remember myself as early as 68 when he said, 1968, when he said that my first objective is to bring the Emirates together and create a state that will safeguard our future. All the diplomatic observers of the time, including the journalists I was looking after, did not believe that this is doable. So but he himself he knew that he can do this, and he brought this hope to his people and then within the region. And now you talk about words, and this conversation is about words. Of course, Sheikh Zayed was a wordsmith of the first order. And this is how he was able to communicate to people around him. He used words, and we know that words are the most important, if you like, gift that mankind has been given, because it is through words that we communicate, that we understand one another, that we build communities, that we build societies, we build nations. Sheikh Zayed had this ability to be the wordsmith in order to embody and to express the hopes, the aspirations of his people to bring his country through. And the third and last point I want to bring here, associated with words, is that for Sheikh Zayed, his objective was of such a humanitarian depth that he did not think of himself as somebody who is here in order to fulfill a mission of serving his people, which he did, of course, but that was not enough. He really thought of himself as somebody with a mission to help mankind. And it's amazing when you think of this back in the 60s, when the country was still small, and we all remember the coastlines that existed then, the small townships, villages that spread in the Emirates. He had this confidence that he can do it because he truly believed that we have a responsibility not only towards one another, but towards all those around us and towards mankind. And again, he had the words that he used in order to embody and to express these ideas. And this is why his impact we find still around with us today. I still walk in a mall in Sharjah or in Fujairah or in Ajman or in Abu Dhabi, and somebody comes up to me to say, were you not the translator for Sheikh Zayed?
That's wonderful. And I think that gets us started because, Sultan, I I've been to the foundation, I've experienced events at the foundation, and I think just what Zaki has said is that he lives on, Sheikh Zayed, in the world today. I think he lives on in you. When I think of the foundation and its mission to caretake and art and actually spread a message through art. And the old adage is a picture is worth 1,000 words. If that's true, I wonder if you could talk to us about how perhaps Sheikh Zayed has lived on in the work that you do, speaking to us a bit about the work that you've done with the creation of the foundation and its mission here, and how it is promoting well-being, flourishing, allowing people to flourish in the Gulf, whereas in other places around the world, we see the opposite, right?
Thank you so much. Thank you, Your Excellency, for always inspiring us and sharing stories. I want to say that I come from the very fortunate generation of Emiratis who grew up at the time that Sheikh Zayed was around, at the time that Sheikh Zayed was president, and I still remember him on television. I still remember the radio. I still remember the feeling of love and joy whenever his name would come up. And I come from the generation of Emiratis that refer to Sheikh Zayed as Baba Zayed, and I feel kind of sad for the very young generation of Emiratis who didn't have this experience of living under his time. And we're very fortunate to have the leadership that we have today in the UAE. His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed embodies so much of these leadership qualities, and I think this generation is lucky in their own way. So when we grew up, we were recipients of this federation, this country that was formed in the early 1970s. And as a child of the 80s and 90s, it falls upon us as Emiratis and others to give back, to do something for the country and not just remain recipients. If we are able to do that, of course, everybody can participate as per their capabilities. If you are not able to collect, you might be able to write. If you're unable to write, you might be able to document by one way or the other. So I think that we are all participants in this nation building. And nation building, yes, it did start in the 1960s, as His Excellency said, and it hasn't ended. It is still ongoing. This library, this beautiful structure, this beautiful space, this center of knowledge and learning wasn't here just 5 years ago. When was the inauguration? 3 years ago? And so this shows you that building is a continuous process and we cannot rest on our laurels. So what I thought I would do in about 2010 is to establish a center for the study and the research and the collection of modern Arab art, which I felt was missing from the UAE. This is the United Arab Emirates. So Arab is the middle word or the middle name of this nation. And I thought that we need to focus on collecting art from the Arab world. Just like the UAE is a center for immigrants from all over the region, I thought that we need a collection that would reflect these cultures that you have around the region. And when I started, we had 30, 40 artworks. We're now well past 2,000. And I think we're just scratching the surface of what is out there. I like to think of ourselves as, in a way, a center, just like this library, a center of archiving, a center of documenting, and a center of collecting as well, but not books, maybe contemporary and modern art.
What are some of the challenges you may have faced, and what are some of the challenges many of the members of our audience may face in terms of trying to do this sort of work, collecting, writing, creating memoirs? If you could reflect on that a bit. And part of this is a reflection on, we've had discussions, Your Excellency, on nomadism not too long ago. A lot of this discussion comes out of this world, the context where society and audience here is very much steeped in orality. And that orality in many ways is a very much a blessing because of the ability that people have to remember things and memorize. I think of Nabati poetry, for example, and its impact in the communities. But what are some of the challenges that you have faced or you must overcome when collecting, archiving, writing, and putting, being a curator, basically, of culture and heritage? If you can comment on that, that would be wonderful.
You know that collecting and archiving and keeping the records for future generations is in the essence of nation building. And I believe that it is the responsibility of certainly government institutions, but also courageous and inspiring collectors like Sultan to do his bit in archiving, in collecting. And it's the responsibility of states to make institutions like this beautiful library in order to work, in order to bring together the elements that would keep for the stability, the durability of its society. Now, I know that this is not something new. I mean, we started collecting cuneiform records from Mesopotamia 2,000, 3,000 years ago, in Egypt, of course, on papyrus paper. Collecting, archiving is essential. And I remember when the UAE started its long journey, this really miraculous journey. The first duty it felt it had to do was to begin archiving what was initially oral. And I remember that in the Diwan, for instance, when the person who was in charge, put in charge there by Sheikh Zayed, Ahmed Khalifa Suwaidi, started looking for simple records. I mean, we needed to know what were the letters exchanged, for instance, between the rulers and the British government or its representatives. What were the treaties that were signed? What were the different incidents that took place? He couldn't find any of this in the Diwan because, as you said, our culture is amazingly oral. And it was, and because it's an oral culture, of course, people had amazing memories. I mean, they could sit down, Sheikh Zayed could sit down and tell you, on such a date, you remember when I sat with the Austrian Chancellor and we discussed this, and he said that, and we agreed that we would do this. But this is now over. I mean, this generation of keeping our heritage and our culture and our records to an oral memory is now past us. So it's very important. We were discussing this with Isabel earlier today. There are so many oral traditions within the Emirati society even now that the first generation remembers, but the young generation does not. And unless we go out and we reap these memories and we record them and we archive them and we place them in depositories like this one, we will lose them. And by losing them, we can lose the very soul of society. And today, I know that the government, our leadership, is focused on the necessity, on the need to instill these feelings of identity, of heritage, of tradition in our school children. I mean, we need to start with them very young. That means that we have to make sure that we have captured and we have archived our oral history. There are challenges, but they are easily overcome now. I mean, the technological revolution that we are living through. Yesterday we heard what artificial intelligence can do to libraries, both positive ways and negative ways. But the means are there, but we need to make sure that there is a collective and an individual effort to go out and collect, archive, and put in a depository for our future generations.
And this is one of the reasons why I love being a university professor, and you're chancellor of a university, because we're on the ground when we're doing this with students, often introducing students, Emirati students who sometimes are learning things for the first time at the university level about the region, particularly the archaeology of the region, because as an archaeologist, we know the region, much of the excavations started a bit later. So now we're really getting going and using all the latest technology. But also then students from the outside, we're fortunate to have a very diverse population. So students coming, like myself, coming from somewhere else, coming and learning about the history of the country, its cultural heritage, and how rich it is. This is all a blessing, I think, for everyone in that process of discovering things. Sultan, I want to turn over to you and talk a bit more, because you you have this dual prong ability to work with words and art and to see the bigger picture. How does collecting then play a role for you at the foundation in terms of trying to perhaps overcome some of the challenges? The art scene in the UAE is a fantastic scene. That's a well of knowledge now that's emerging, and creativity and flourishing activities. In some ways, it's hard to even get the big picture of what's going on because there's so many artists that are working. So what can you tell us about the processes that are involved in working with the artistic community and archiving that material so that future generations can see what was being done, and they look back 50 years from now or 100 years from now and they say, aha, it's the Barjeel Foundation. Go to the Barjeel Foundation and its archives, right, to find things out.
Even though we are a relatively young country, we're 52 years old now, 53, I think, in 2 weeks. So much has happened that we are at the risk of losing our recent artistic, as well as urban and other memories. So much has happened since the 1970s, 80s, and 90s. Schools of art, movement. We have lost in the last few years a number of leading Emirati artists, like Hassan Sharif, for example, who passed away a few years ago. And so it's important that we take advantage of the opportunity to interview, document, collect not only the artist's works, like what we do, but collect information about these artists, about their biographies, about their scribbles, their notes. There is not much that has been done, although I'm very encouraged. Over the past 10 years, we've had, for example, a number of major exhibitions and a number of major publications that came out about Emirati artists, but not much has been written about the art scene in the UAE. And by the way, the UAE, people forget that the UAE's art scene is not just Emiratis, it's people from all over the world who participated. You've had a gallery in Dubai called Majlis Gallery that was founded by a British lady, and I think an Indian lady was also involved. And this gallery was there for decades, and it unfortunately just shut down 3 years ago. Well, we need to document the life and the history of that gallery. Who showed, what happened, what were the major events that took place there? Because this is part of the history of the Emirates, part of that it reflects who came, who visited, what happened, where were these artworks sold. And I went to see a collector in Abu Dhabi a few days ago, Paul Al-Askari, and she invited us to her home, and she showed us artworks that she collected in Abu Dhabi from the early 80s of Diya Azzawi and other major artists. And so people wouldn't have known that all these important artists were coming to the UAE in the 1970s and 80s, exhibiting, living here sometimes. And so I think we are really seeing a lot of progress, but not much has been done. And I also want to say one more thing. We are focusing too much on English. We need to focus more, we don't neglect English, but we need to also not neglect Arabic, because a lot of the information is available only in Arabic, and we need Arabic researchers. We have a lot of wonderful researchers who come from the West, but we need to empower Arabic-speaking researchers to make sure that the history of this country is documented, whether it is art or any other factor. When I was working on the architecture book, I needed to go back to not only Arabic, but other regional languages, including Hindi, Malayalam, even Persian, and some other languages from the region in order to document and find information. Even Turkish, by the way, because that's where architects came from.
I think that's an incredible point, because so much of our research has to, and we tell our students this all the time, has to take place with primary sources, and that means getting back, in order to do it genuinely, getting back into the original languages that something was written or spoken, and that's part of the heritage process as well. What about a bit of maybe some advice, counsel, shall we say, from the world of nomads? What can you tell us about what can we learn from nomadic society as a whole, from Bedouin society? And I say this like so many other questions that we all have these days as we watch the world in a very fragile state in many different places. It seems like people no longer help one another. What can we glean from the nomadic realm that we can actually bring into our lives today, into society and government and private lives as well, and all our relationships?
Thank you. I'd like first to add on to something that's what Sultan was speaking about, and this is to underline the importance that the UAE played in bringing to the attention of the world the art movement in the Gulf region, because until recently, art was looked at as a West-centric act of creativity. I mean, the Emirates have been quite active from the 80s, in fact, from the 70s, from the 80s. I remember exhibitions for Abdel Qadir Reyes in the 70s. We organized in the Alliance Française and elsewhere. And I know that the Sharjah has been very active internationally in bringing artists and bringing the attention of art critics to this region. And of course, the big projects that we have, the international global museums, the Louvre and the Guggenheim and the National Art Museum, also helped in bringing people out from the rest of the world to look at what we have here. I remember when the Louvre was being negotiated, there were critics in the French press that said, why is it that the Louvre would go out and sit into a desert patch? And of course, then it was realized and recognized that this is an important act that opens channels of communication, not only that benefit the UAE, but also benefited France. And Sultan knows that today Arab artists, Middle East artists are recognized internationally. They have their own retrospectives in international museums, including, of course, the Guggenheim and Hassan Sharif and others. I'll come to the question, what is the most important lesson we can take from our nomadic culture? And we discussed nomadism, if you remember, at the book fair, when we said that unfortunately the impact that nomadic society had on world civilization was not truly recognized because it was simply oral, that it was not put down, it was not archived, it was not recorded, it was not kept in a depository of knowledge. So I think this is the first lesson we learned from what also Sultan was saying, from what our discussions we had. We need to go out and record our oral traditions and what has been done in our society, so that it is not forgotten in the future, so that we do not have a young generation that grows up in a cosmopolitan society, living in a cosmopolitan city, that suddenly forgets its roots. In the past, of course, poetry, we always said poetry was the Diwan al-Arab, and poetry kept a record, if you like, of some of our traditions and heritage. This is no longer the case today. People do not, unfortunately, learn poetry or learn it as they did in the past. They have the modern social media to consult. Our oral tradition is one that needs to be fully recorded and fully kept in a depository. So this, I would say, is the first lesson we need to take from this. And we need to know that, yes, nomadic societies have made an impact on the march of civilization, but as usual, history is a narrative. And if you don't work with that narrative, it's forgotten and then it's put to the side.
Sultan, I'll turn the question over to you. And when you think about nomadic society as well, what would you say and you can talk a bit about art as well. I, as an archaeologist, deal a lot with petroglyphs, for example. So often people think there's no art, but there's a wealth of art, right, coming out of the desert in many forms. But what do you think are the hallmarks, the takeaways that we can sort of set our eyes upon?
I think adding to what His Excellency had said, there's so much to learn about nomadic society and what people consider to be a simple life. Today, everyone talks about sustainability and climate and the environment. These are lessons that people are searching, I think, everywhere except in the essence where the most sustainable people in the world were living in these lands, in the lands of the Emirates, the most sustainable people on this planet, people who didn't waste, people who used every single element of a tree or an animal, people who built their homes from sustainable and recyclable and reusable items. I remember my father telling me stories like of when somebody sells a house, people come and take the wooden door and place it in a new house. So you don't discard, you don't throw away. And I think what we are seeing now is, His Excellency has spoken about this a few days ago at the Ittihad Museum, is a recognition of the crafts of nomadic life. It's the UAE, Your Excellency, you had spoken about, going this extra mile and registering this nomadic, so-called crafts, but they are arts, like Sedu. For example, the art of making these carpets and tapestries in the UNESCO as a World Heritage, as a global heritage of humanity, immaterial heritage. So there are things that we're slowly trying to learn or relearn, and it's amazing because the UAE just 50, 60 years ago was a very, very sustainable country, and now I think we need to catch up to where we were before.
Yeah, I love this line of relearning, and I tell our students at the university often that we are part of a big chain, and we're links in that big chain. And if we, the only way we can contribute to the strength of that chain is by telling stories. And it's these stories that are the heart of community and the heart of living on, and other people and sort of giving back to the community and giving to others is by telling these stories and letting them live on as part of strengthening this chain of community and society. And this applies so well in this country, I think, because it's Emiratis who are contributing these stories to Emiratis, but also to the larger GCC Khaliji population, but also to the larger world, because so many people are passing through, residing here, passing through, whether it's permanently living here for a while or just passing through on holiday. The impact is enormous. I'd like to open up for some questions because we're running a bit out of time. So we'd like to hear from you. Yes? Is there a microphone? Yeah, there we go. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to start by thanking you so much for this inspiring discussion. My name is Asma. As a librarian of the arts and a practicing artist myself, knowing the importance of research to art making, how do you think we can serve the art community better? How can we reach the art community better in this regard? If my question is clear.
I think, so the question is, as a librarian and researcher, how can we actually help the art community
yes,
in their research practices?
Exactly. Yes.
Well, I think we have right now a number of centers, including the New York Mawrid, which is run by Salwa Miqdadi and which is archiving what artists have been doing. The New York Gallery is one. We have, of course, the Barjil foundation, which has truly done something revolutionary because it has put everything, numerized everything, and put it on a website where you can have access to this information. So helping the artist and the artist community is by making them aware that there are resources that are available in the UAE now, and that they should use those resources, and that they should also benefit from the different events that take place in the Emirates, including the Sharjah Biennale, including the Dubai Art, including Abu Dhabi Art that we will be celebrating next week. So I believe that the resources are now there. But we need to make the artistic community or the art community more aware of what resources are available for them. And we want to make sure that we encourage, of course, a collector's base in the Emirates, because artists in the end also live by selling their art. If you are an artist, this is something that is important for you. And we need to, again, spread that awareness in our community that you don't have to go and buy very expensive art in order to start a collection. You can begin by buying art from starting artists. I mean, it's a collective effort by institutions, by individuals, by communities. But the resources are there now, I believe, in the Emirates, much more so than in any other community I know.
So I think we have to be creative with our research. So libraries are centers of learning, yes, but they're also centers of networking. So what's happening today, yesterday, today, and tomorrow is very important. The fact that you, Asma, I think, you are meeting with other librarians, you're meeting with other researchers. This is really one of the primary jobs of a library. It's not just having the books and the periodicals, which are very important, but these opportunities that are made between the sessions, where in the 15, 20 minutes between session A and session B, you go and you meet another researcher and you exchange cards and you build on this knowledge and you exchange ideas and then you collaborate maybe on a project. But I want to tell you a story of this artist that I acquired a few months ago from Lebanon. Her name was Aida Marini, and she was born in Cairo. And that's all we knew about her. Nothing else. She was Lebanese origin, born in Cairo. When, where, what, why, who, nothing. We had nothing about her. So I basically asked a question online. And I said, has anyone heard of this artist? Just on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter. And I thought, let's see. You as the Arabic saying goes, you throw your fishing rod and you hope that some fish will come and catch it. So within a few days, I got messages. I got some librarian at the American University of Beirut saying, I went through and I found documents we have about her. She was a student at AUB. Really? Okay, so we were able to find her date of birth, 1918. Able to find that she studied at AUB. We knew that, so we knew where she studied. We were able to find that she exhibited 3 times. Once in America, Minnesota, I think New York and Washington. We found out that she exhibited in the UNESCO Palace in Beirut in 1955. We found out that she traveled to I don't know where in Europe. So just by taking this courageous role, going out, asking people, I think thinking about research at a larger scenario or larger case research, and not only focusing on what's available, asking the public, asking online, asking sons and daughters of artists. But I think really the main theme should be collaboration. Asma, for you and for others, you need to collaborate. Find people who are like-minded in this audience, in this conference, and collaborate with them in your research. Invite them to your library and work with them on a project. I think that's the most fun.
And I would like to add that what Sultan has done, particularly, I believe, of significant importance, is to focus on women artists in the Middle East. Because like elsewhere as well, people always focused on male artists. And now, of course, even in Europe, there is an interest in looking at discovering women artists who lived the same period with those famous male artists. And Sultan was the first person in the Middle East to go out and research women artists and make the society, the community aware of their work. So I believe that.
I usually say I'm not the first. So His Excellency mentioned the name of a very important individual. Her name is Salwa Maqdadi, and she founded Al Mawrid Center for the study and research of modern Arab art, which is based at NYU Abu Dhabi. She's amongst the first. She is really a pioneer of the study of women artists in the Arab world. And we are so fortunate to have her here in the UAE. This individual really is a treasure for the UAE, and I'm not sure if I can say this publicly, but she has been so generous that she has given her collection to the university, her collection of research, of books, of materials, that she has given it to the center. She feels like it's her an extension of her life.
It's her mission. It's her mission.
It's her mission. It's her mission, and it reminds me of another great individual who's amongst us today, His Excellency Muhammad Al-Mir, who really has, in addition to building this incredible library, has gifted it with his incredible collection. So we're so lucky to have people like this, leaders. We have leaders of this caliber in this country. We are so fortunate.
Thank you to both of you. I will open up floor for a few more questions. Yes.
Please. If I can add some idea, can you establish a map of connections to reach this collaboration and to provide more
to establish collaboration?
More facilities.
How can you help that?
I can suggest to you, first of all, where you are right now is the best opportunity to establish networks and collaborations. But many conferences, they come out with call for papers. So for example, if you are interested in researching literature in Syria in the early 20th century, you will find that there are conferences, events, individuals who have written about the subject, so you should reach out to them. There's a very interesting conference that takes place in Cambridge every year called the Gulf Research Meeting, GRM. They do excellent work, especially researching the Gulf states. So there's many other examples I'll try to remember.
And let me add, incidentally, go out and use artificial intelligence, because now you can ask almost any question to say, I want to know what association, what community can I be, can I join in order to do this or that. And it's amazing the kind of information that comes to you. So go out and use this new technology. This new technology is going to revolutionize our lives.
Thank you.
So much. First of all, what an amazing talk. And I just wanted to remind you, Your Excellency Zaki, a story you told me. You were sat in Spain with the late Sheikh Zayed and a group of his close colleagues. They were watching on TV space, someone landing, I don't know if it was landing on the moon, but it was, and he turned to them and said, we're going to do this. Can you just relate that journey of words from that to where we are today? Thank you.
Well, the story was in 1969, and we were in Malaga, and we were watching the landing of the first man on the moon. And everybody around Sheikh Zayed was saying, but this is nonsense, this is make-believe, this cannot happen. There are 7 heavens, and no one can go through the 7 heavens. And one of the doubters, the strongest, Sheikh Zayed always traveled with the chiefs of tribes, with his senior citizens around him. One of them was the senior sheikh of the Manasir tribe. And Sheikh Zayed told them, but no, this is the will of God. God had created man, and he created the universe, and everything is possible through his will. And of course, everyone around it starts saying, yes, that makes sense. It's an explanation. And the story of this is that, of course, our first spaceman to go into space was a Manasir. He was a grandchild. That's a circle of a journey of words.
Thank you. We have one other question here.
Good evening, Your Excellency, Sheikh Sultan and Dr. William. We are all proud of your amazing work. My question is, what one mistake you think cities make when they are trying to preserve their heritage? What's one mistake? What's one mistake cities make when they are trying to preserve their heritage?
So one mistake that cities make when trying to preserve their heritage.
So one mistake that cities make when they try to preserve their heritage, I think this is a bit of urbanism. I think in trying to preserve buildings in a stale manner. So when you find a building and you try to preserve it, but then it becomes an edifice of nothingness. It's just an empty block. What you need to do when you preserve your urban heritage is to make it a living, breathing, usable building, a building that is still that can still be visited and used and experienced by a younger generation. So any city that's trying to preserve a building, don't try and just convert it into some kind of sacred structure that nobody can even enter. It's important that people are able to experience this space. I hope that answers your question.
I think that's a good response. The living space.
And the fundamental lesson, of course, is don't destroy these buildings. In order to modernize, the buildings should be kept, especially the urban heritage that Sultan talks about. So we shouldn't demolish them in order to create new modern buildings in their stead.
Other questions? Yes, please. I think the microphone's coming your way. So, yeah.
Just a small suggestion, a Grandparents' Day. Think about what it will make to our schools and universities. This is a way, the first step into documenting oral history, right? From grandparents to, from children communicating with their grandparents. And this is how we will start to have like ceremonies and competitions and a way to document. So.
I believe that's very important. You know, a friend of mine who's now incidentally our ambassador in Japan told me a story about his mother, recounting to him the trip she made from Abu Dhabi to Al Ain. In those days, it took a few days. They traveled by camel. They had incidents along the way. And I told him, go out and record her. Record your grandmother. Let her, and then keep this in an archive because this is important. So yes, I believe everyone should go to their grandparents and listen to their stories and record those stories.
I asked ChatGPT, there is no day at the moment, following your advice.
We have a question in the back, please.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I'm coming on the word of oral archives, just like she's saying. Mine will be you being on a policy-making position and the chancellor of a university. What can we do to advocate, the integration of a course on oral archives and indigenous knowledge management into the curriculum of training information curators? Because we have information to disseminate when we create it, and there is a gap, as you have mentioned with the example of the nomadic history. There's a lot when we look at many other aspects of humanity. And those are things that we need to have to trace our roots. That is why we can see the UNESCO Memory of the World trending all over the place. So what can we do, therefore, to advocate for universities to integrate this component into the training of people who are supposed to manage knowledge and disseminate knowledge? Thank you.
Thank you very much. In fact, you are absolutely right. It's very important that we integrate this into our curricula in universities. We are trying to do this in the UAEU. We were discussing earlier, for instance, the need to train librarians. We do not have sufficient numbers of trained librarians who can come in order to work at recording, archiving, and creating the community life that libraries should offer their communities. The importance of oral tradition, of course, is when we were discussing the impact of nomads on human civilization. The argument at the time was that, on the whole, people look to the nomadic invasions in Central Asia and think of them as invading savages. I mean, they talk of Hulago, they talk of, but in fact, they were instrumental in establishing the cultures and civilizations that evolved in Central Asia. And the argument of the writer that who we were discussing this with was that it's because it is only oral, it was never recorded, and therefore it was forgotten. So this is a lesson. I believe we should take this lesson, we should integrate it into our teaching curricula. Today, the leadership, as I said, in the Emirates are focused on the need to instill this in our own young children. So how do we do this? We introduce it into the school curricula and then into university curricula. We need to train archivists, we need to train librarians, we need to train art archivists, we need to train them in the Arabic language. You're so right. We need to create the magazines that can discuss this in Arabic. So all of this is important, and I believe that we should continue in order to expand this process.
Sultan? No? Okay. So I think we should conclude our session. I would like to thank our esteemed panelists, Your Excellency and Sultan, for discussing with us. You both truly are wordsmiths, and I want to thank you for that and bringing us on this journey. And you are both lovers, like I am, lovers of libraries, art, archives, and galleries. So we're all in good company with our distinguished members of the audience as well. Thank you very much.
دبي موئل الثقافات وحاضنة الإبداع، تحتضن بين أركانها مزيجا فريدا من الثقافات والتقاليد، حيث يلتقي التراث العريق مع الفكر الحديث. على مر العصور كانت دبي مركزا للحوار الحضاري وبيئة مثالية لتلاقي العقول والأفكار من مختلف أرجاء العالم، ساعية دوما لتعزيز ثقافة المعرفة والانفتاح. وهنا اليوم في قلب دبي حيث يبنى المستقبل. في هذا الصرح الثقافي مكتبة محمد بن راشد تلتقي نخبة من العقول من جميع أنحاء العالم في حدث يجمع بين أمجاد الماضي وتحديات الحاضر ورؤى المستقبل. أهلا بكم في أول نسخة من مؤتمر دبي الدولي للمكتبات، حيث تبدأ رحلة جديدة لإعادة تعريف دور المكتبات في العالم. أكثر من 60 خبيراً من 25 دولة يجتمعون ليطرحوا رؤى جديدة ستعيد تشكيل مفهوم المكتبات. استعدوا لاستكشاف التحول الرقمي في المكتبات عبر الذكاء الاصطناعي واكتشاف الكنوز الأيقونية والمجموعات النادرة. من خلال أكثر من 60 جلسة نلقي الضوء على مستقبل المكتبات وأهمية التراث والمعرفة للأجيال القادمة. إنه الحدث الذي سيخلد في تاريخ المكتبات، مؤتمر دبي الدولي للمكتبات 2024، حيث يجتمع الماضي والحاضر والمستقبل.